What's Ben's best alien when it comes to throwing hands? Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the one that can erase you from existence with extraterrestrial powers. I mean the alien you'd actually bet on if the fight stayed up close and personal. Sounds simple enough until you realize Ben has over 70 transformations, and half of them solve problems by doing literally anything except punching people. So today I picked the 10 aliens that I think belong in this conversation, and no, this is not just a strength ranking. If it was, this video would have been about 30 seconds long and honestly pretty boring, I think. Instead, I have put every alien in a scoring system. Some categories are obvious like fighting, ability and strength, but the biggest one is feats. And by feats, I don't mean what their species should theoretically be capable of. I mean what Ben actually accomplished with that alien. So no, Gas doesn't get bonus points just because Gas wakes up every morning and chooses violence. A couple things before we start. Ultimate aliens are out because they are temporary, plus it would make a boring list. You also won't see aliens like Diamond Head, Cannonball, Accelerate or Crash Hopper. Not because they are weak, but because they usually win using their other prominent abilities, not pure hand-to-hand combat. This list is about aliens whose biggest strength is physically fighting their opponent. Alright, enough explaining, time to make half the Ben 10 fandom angry. Kicking things off at number 10 is Frankenstrike.
Electromagnetic body. Sweet.
And honestly, this guy had one of the hardest auditions for the list. Because even till the last moment, I was having second thoughts about putting him in the list. Why? Because in the most people's mind, he's more of an electric alien than a physical fighter. But after seeing only a handful of moments the show has given of him, I decided to include him because his physical attributes simply can't be ignored, just like a few more aliens in the list. But complications aside, he is incredible to put down. He is physically powerful, tough as nails, and getting punched by Frankenstein is already a terrible idea. Getting electrocuted halfway through the punch just feels like he is being petty. One of his best showings comes against Dr. Victor, where he proves he can take a beating, stay in the fight, and turn the tables when it matters. That's exactly the kind of evidence that earned him a spot here. And here's what keeping him at number 10. When I compare him to everyone above him, his fighting style starts to feel predictable. He is incredibly effective, but he doesn't adapt the way the higher ranked aliens do. There are not many creative counters, combinations or technical exchanges. He mostly wins by being strong, tougher and harder to kill than the guy standing in front of him. And that's not a bad thing, it's just that everyone else on the list gives me more reason to bet on them once the fight becomes about skill instead of survival. Frankenstein absolutely deserves to be here, but this is about the best hand-to-hand fighters Ben has, not just the hardest ones to knock over. At number 9, we've got the alien that probably sits closest in the middle of almost every category, Shocksquatch.
Shocksquatch? Okay.
He's strong, surprisingly athletic for his size, unlike Frankenstein. He mixes his electricity into his actual fighting instead of treating it like a bonus feature. Watching him throw people around while shocking them at the same time is exactly why he made this list. He also has some genuine impressive moments, like overpowering Bug Lizard and smashing both of them straight through a subway tunnel. I don't think underground public transport has still recovered from this. But consistency is where things start slipping. We've also seen him get completely outclassed by Ultimate Spider Monkey, and while there's no shame in losing to an ultimate form, it does show where his ceiling is compared to the fighters still left on this list. Shocksquatch doesn't really have a glaring weakness. The problem is everyone above him has a much bigger strength. At number 8 is the most frustrating alien on the list, Spider Monkey.
Spider Monkey!
Because if I rank these aliens on potential alone, he'd be fighting for the top 3. Forearms, webbing, a prehensile tail, insane agility, wall crawling. Spider Monkey doesn't have to worry about toolkit. There are very few aliens who have as many potentials in close combat as Spider Monkey. He can attack from almost any angle, control distance, trap opponents, and consistently stay on the move. And we have seen him using all of this toolkit against Ultimate Kevin, where he did put a great fight, even though he lost. Because he was Ultimate Kevin, right? So why is only at number 8? Because potential isn't the same thing as performance. We have seen Spider Monkey struggle against DN aliens, while Simeon handles similar opponents much more convincingly. That's not enough to call him a bad fighter, actually far from it. But it does not stop me from putting him alongside Ben's true hand-to-hand specialist. He's one of the most versatile aliens in the Omnitrix. I just wish his fight record matched his toolkit a little more often. Coming in at number 7 is where people least likely to agree with me, which is Bullfrag.
Call me Bullfrag. You coming or what?
And before you ask how a giant frog is above aliens like Shock Squatch or Spider Monkey, hear me out. Bullfrog isn't here because he's stronger. He clearly isn't. He's here because he's one of the most technically impressive fighters Ben has ever unlocked. Every fight feels deliberate. He dodges instead of tanking, looks for openings instead of forcing them, and uses his tongue for grapples, disarms, and movement instead of treating it like a gimmick. His best showcase comes during the Incursion arc, where he spends almost the entire time fighting soldiers and bounty hunters while constantly adapting to different situations. That's exactly kind of consistency I'm looking for the list. Now the obvious downside is raw physical stats. If Bullfrog gets into a straight up slugfest with someone like Humongosaur, he's probably getting launched into next week. But this isn't a lifting competition, it's a fight, and Bullfrog has repeatedly shown that technique can close up a surprising amount of that gap. That's why he lands at number 7. At number 6, we've got the alien with the smallest review on the entire list, Gax. Honestly, Gax was one of the hardest aliens to score because we simply don't get much time with him. And what do we see is enough to make one thing obvious. Ben basically gets some mini Vilgax. He's incredibly strong, durable, has excellent reach thanks to those tentacles, and unlike most bruisers, he can control a fight from multiple angles at once. One of his best moments is overpowering enemies with a mix of raw strength and surprisingly efficient close-range combat instead of just swinging widely. And here's why he's only number 6. I'm only giving him credit what Ben's Gax actually accomplished, not Vilgax. If I started borrowing feats from other characters, this ranking would fall apart faster than Kevin's Scar. Gax has all of these tools to be much higher, he just doesn't have enough screen time to prove it. Alright, here's a placement I know some of you have been waiting for. Humongosaur at number 5.
Humongosaur!
And yes, only number 5. And before anyone closes the video, hear me out please. This is the placement surprised me more than anyone. I actually had to go back and rescore him because I could not believe where Humongosaur ended up. When it comes to raw strength and durability, Humongosaur is an absolute monster. This guy has thrown around opponents that would flatten most of the Omnitrix. Stood toe to toe with Hybrid, fought Vilgax multiple times, and somehow walks away from almost every fight looking like he just finished a leg day. His durability is honestly ridiculous, but strength isn't what keeping him out of top 4. Actually, it's his fighting ability. Humongosaur's approach is usually pretty simple. Overpower the other guy before they overpower you. And to be fair, that works surprisingly often for Ben. The problem is that compared to the aliens above him, he doesn't adapt much once plans A stop working. His size can also become a disadvantage, making him easier to read and limiting what he can actually do in close quarters. If this was the strongest aliens list, Humongosaur would be fighting for number 1. But this isn't a strongest aliens list, and that's exactly why he's here. If Humongosaur is raw power, Armadillo is raw power with a toolkit.
Armadillo!
At first glance, these two seem incredibly similar. They are both heavy hitters that rely on overwhelming physical strength. But the more I compared them, the more Armadillo kept pulling ahead. His drill arms completely change how he fights. He's not just weapons, they are mobility, defense, crowd control, and environmental destruction all rolled into one. That versatility gives him far more ways to approach a fight than Humongosaur. And Armadillo is pretty good at destroying trains. We see this every time he appears in Omniverse. And during Fisher fight, Armadillo completely dominates him. And this one would have been his probably the biggest feat, but Ben actually doesn't do it. It's Andres. In the Adrenal's Fault episode, Andres absorbs and neutralizes a seismic bomb powerful enough to devastate an entire area while surviving the collapse around him. That's one of the craziest durability feats on the entire list, but it's not actually Armadillo, but I think he's close enough in the durability. He's not a technical fighter like Hawk or Bullfrog, but unlike Humongosaur, he has multiple ways to apply his strength instead of simply relying on it. And that extra layer of versatility is exactly what pushes him into top 4. And now we are in top 3. At this point, every alien left has at least one argument for being number 1. Now, at number 3, we've got alien that completely changed how I looked at this ranking. Hawk.
Who's gonna kick your teeth in?
Let's be honest, if someone told you a few years ago that a giant chicken would probably finish above Humongosaur, you'd probably assume they hit their head harder than Ben does every time he mistransforms. But then you actually watch what Hawk does. Unlike most of Ben's heavy hitters, Hawk doesn't rely on overwhelming strength to win. He relies on technique. Every movement feels deliberate. His kicks are not just stronger than his punches, they are faster, more precise, and constantly chained into combinations. He's one of the few aliens where it genuinely looks like Ben gains much confidence in fighting than many other aliens. One of his best showcase comes against Liam. Ben doesn't simply overpower him, he outclasses him. He controls the pace of the fight, punishes mistakes, and constantly creates openings. Even his battle against Fistrick's crew shows just how naturally this alien handles multiple opponents without losing control of the fight. Now does he hit as hard as Humongousaur? Not even close. Could he survive the punishment Forearms or Wrath can? Probably not. But if we are talking about pure hand-to-hand skills, I honestly don't think anyone in the Omnitrix does it better. And Ben also says that. The only reason he isn't number 1 is because the last two aliens combine that level of fighting ability with something Kick and Hawk simply can't match. Overwhelming physical power. Now we get to... And honestly, I think Wrath is one of the most misunderstood fighter in the entire franchise. People remember the screaming, the insults, the fact that every sentence somehow starts with "let me tell you something." That's iconic. But underneath all that anger is an incredible intelligent close range fighter. Watch his fights carefully. Wrath doesn't just throw punches, he wrestles, grapples, trips opponents, slams them into the environment and constantly forces them into uncomfortable positions. He's one of the few aliens that genuinely understand how to control another fighter instead of simply overpowering them. His fights against Luma and Captain Nemesis are perfect examples. Luma is every bit as aggressive as Wrath, yet he keeps finding ways to turn her momentum against her. Captain Nemesis tries to fight smarter, but Wrath's pressure never lets him settle into a rhythm. Even against physically stronger opponents, Wrath always finds a way to make this fight messy, because that's exactly where he's at his best. And unlike Kick and Hawk, Wrath backs all of that technique with incredible strength and durability. You can knock him down, throw him against buildings or slam him into the ground, and somehow he always gets back up angrier than before. Remember what I said in the beginning of the video? Strength alone doesn't make you the best fighter. Wrath proves the opposite. Skill alone isn't enough either. To reach the very top, you need both, and only one alien combines them better. And which finally brings us to the number 1, Forearms. And honestly, this was the only placement I'd never changed, because Forearms isn't the best hand-to-hand alien for one specific reason. He's the best because he never gives you a reason to bet against him. He's ridiculously strong, he's incredibly durable, and more importantly, he actually knows how to fight. The best example is his fight against Princess Luma. Most people remember that fight because he wins. I remember it because how he wins. Watch it again. He isn't just throwing bigger punches. He's blocking, countering, grappling, and using all 4 arms independently. Mixing in kicks, controlling distance, and constantly adapting as the fight changes. That's not brute force anymore, that's technique. And it's not just Princess Luma. Throughout the original series, Alien Force and Omniverse, Forearms is consistently Ben's answer whenever the solution is simple. Go beat that guy. Whether it's Kevin, Vilgax, the Vaxasaur, or dozens of other physical opponents, Forearms almost never looks out of his depth. That's what separates him from someone like Humongousaur. Humongousaur often wins because he's stronger. Forearms wins because he's stronger and a better fighter. He doesn't have Kick and Hawk's precision. He doesn't have Wrath's insanity. He doesn't have Bullfrog's agility. But he takes just enough from all of them to become the most complete close-range alien Ben has ever unlocked. And that's why Forearms takes my number 1 spot. So that's the list. Or at least that's what some of you probably thought. Because if you spend this entire video wondering where one very obvious alien is, don't worry, I didn't forget him. Meet number 0. Way big.
That's a big alien.
Now before you start celebrating or writing an angry comment because I robbed him of the number 1, hear me out. Way big doesn't belong on this ranking because he'd completely change what this ranking is. If I were to judge raw power, he'd probably win. Strength 10, durability 10, feats also 10. The guy has gone toe to toe with giant Vilgax, reset colossal monsters, battled malware at skyscraper scale, and even fought other Togo stars. He's also a much better fighter than people give him credit for, but almost every one of those fights happen on an entire different battlefield. Comparing Way Big to Wrath or Kick and Hawk is like comparing MMA fighter to Godzilla. Yeah, technically they are both fighting, but they are not playing the same game. So instead of forcing him into the ranking, I gave him his own spot. Number 0. Above the list, but outside the competition. Now I know some of you are already planning your own ranking, and honestly that's the whole point. If you think I got one horribly wrong, tell me why. Just don't say Humongousaur should be number 1 because he's stronger. We had that conversation for about 10 minutes. If you enjoyed this ranking, let me know which Ben 10 list you'd like to see next. Until then, thanks for watching. Peace out.